The alarm screamed through Hyejin's cockpit as her ship tore through the atmosphere like a dying star. Red warning lights bathed her pale blue skin in an eerie glow, while sparks flew from damaged control panels. She gripped the flight controls with hands that could crush steel, but even her superhuman strength couldn't save the dying vessel. "Emergency systems failing," the ship's computer announced in the cold mechanical voice of her people. "Hull breach detected. Life support at 30%. Hyejin's violet eyes narrowed as she fought to maintain control. She was Velthari, bred for war and trained to kill since childhood. Her people ruled a dozen star systems through fear and superior technology. She had never failed a mission in her 23 years of life. But now, chasing a human diplomat who had escaped their prison world, everything was going wrong. The frozen planet below grew larger in her view screen. New Sol, the humans called it. A backwater colony world on the edge of known space. Snow-covered mountains stretched endlessly beneath churning storm clouds. The blizzard raged across the landscape like an angry beast, swallowing everything. In white fury, her ship shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere. The stealth systems that made her invisible to human sensors had overloaded during the chase. Now she was flying blind through a storm that could tear apart even military craft. Ice began forming on her cracked view screen as the temperature dropped. "Come on," she whispered through gritted teeth, speaking in the harsh language of her warrior race. Just a little further, but the planet had other plans. A massive wind shear caught her damaged ship and sent it spinning out of control. Hyejin's head slammed against the pilot's seat as the world turned upside down. Through blurred vision, she saw trees rushing up to meet her. Giant pines covered in snow and ice, each one ready to crush her small craft. The impact came like thunder. Metal screamed against wood and stone as the ship carved a path through the forest. Trees snapped like twigs while the hull tore apart piece by piece. Hyejin felt something warm running down her face. Blood. Her blood was red just like the humans. She hunted, though she would never admit the similarity. When the spinning finally stopped, silence filled the broken cockpit. Only the howling wind outside broke the quiet. Hyejin tried to move, but pain shot through her left shoulder. Something was definitely broken. Her advanced healing would fix it eventually, but right now she was as vulnerable as any wounded animal. She looked around the wreckage of her ship. The communication array was destroyed. The power core was dead. Even her emergency beacon had been crushed in the crash. No one would be coming to rescue her. In Velthari culture, warriors who failed their missions deserved whatever fate awaited them. The cold hit her as soon as she crawled from the wreckage. Her skin, adapted for the warm climate of her homeworld, immediately began turning pale. Velthari were strong and fast, but they couldn't survive in freezing temperatures for long. The blizzard outside was like walking into a wall of ice and wind. Snow immediately began covering her black combat suit as she stumbled away from the smoking ship. Each step was harder than the last. Her breath came out in white puffs that the wind snatched away. The mission was forgotten now. Finding the human diplomat didn't matter anymore. Only survival mattered, and with each passing minute, even that seemed impossible. Dongwu pulled his thick winter coat tighter as he stepped out of the weather station into the howling blizzard. The wind hit him like a slap in the face, and snow immediately began sticking to his glasses. He had been monitoring the storm systems for 3 days now, but this was the worst he had seen in his 5 years working alone at Station Echo 7. His job was simple but important. He maintained the equipment that helped predict weather patterns for the entire colony. When storms like this one hit, the early warnings he sent could save hundreds of lives in the settlements below. It was lonely work, but Dongwu preferred the quiet mountains to the busy cities where he grew up. He was checking the wind measurement tools when he heard it, a deep rumbling sound that didn't belong to the storm. It came from somewhere in the forest, followed by the sound of breaking trees. Dongwu stopped and listened carefully. Living alone for so long had made his hearing sharp. Something big had crashed out there. Probably a cargo transport, he said to himself, his breath creating white clouds in the freezing air. Poor pilot picked a bad day to fly. But as he listened, more he realized the sound was wrong. Human ships made a different noise when they crashed. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Still, if someone was hurt out there, he couldn't just ignore it. Dongwu grabbed his emergency pack from inside the station. It contained medical supplies, emergency blankets, and a portable heater. He had trained for rescue situations, though he never expected to use that training. The storm was getting worse, but his conscience wouldn't let him stay warm and safe while someone might be dying in the snow. Following the sound took him deeper into the pine forest than he had ever gone before. The trees blocked some of the wind, but they also made it darker and harder to see. His flashlight beam danced through the falling snow as he pushed through branches heavy with ice. That's when he found the wreckage. It wasn't like any ship he had ever seen. The metal was black and smooth, with strange markings that definitely weren't human writing. Parts of it were still smoking despite the snow. Whatever this thing was, it had come from somewhere far beyond. For their little colony world. Dongwu's heart pounded as he realized what this meant. First contact. The colony had always known other species existed somewhere in the galaxy, but they had never made contact. Now one of them had literally fallen from the sky into his backyard. He almost turned back. This was way above his pay grade. The colony government had protocols for this kind of thing. But then he saw movement near the wreckage. Someone was crawling away from the crashed ship, leaving a trail of dark spots in the snow. The figure collapsed about 50 meters from the wreck. Even from a distance, Dongwu could tell this wasn't human. The body was too tall and too slim. But as he got closer, he could see it was definitely alive and definitely hurt. She was unconscious when he reached her. Her skin was pale blue and getting paler by the minute. Strange markings covered her arms like tattoos, and her hair was white as the snow around them. She wore some kind of black combat armor that looked both advanced and dangerous. Everything about her screamed warrior, but right now she looked as helpless as anyone else freezing to death. Dongwu knew he should be scared. This could be an enemy soldier or some kind of alien hunter. But looking at her unconscious face, all he saw was someone who needed help. His grandmother had always taught him that helping others was what made humans special. Even if this wasn't human, the principle still applied. Hye-jin woke up to the smell of something she had never experienced before. Something warm and comforting that made her stomach growl despite her confusion. Her violet eyes opened slowly, taking in the small room around her, wooden walls, a crackling fireplace, and simple human furniture. She was lying on a soft couch covered in thick blankets, and for the first time in days she wasn't cold. Her hand immediately went to her side where her weapon should be. Gone. Panic shot through her until she saw it sitting on a table across, the room carefully cleaned and placed next to her other gear. The human hadn't destroyed her things or hidden them. He had simply moved them out of reach while she recovered. "You're awake," came a gentle voice from the kitchen area. Dongwu appeared carrying a steaming bowl. "I made some soup. You've been unconscious for almost 2 days. Hye-jin tried to sit up, but her shoulder screamed in protest. The human immediately moved to help her, but she pulled away with a hiss. In Velthari culture, accepting help was a sign of weakness. Warriors who couldn't care for themselves deserved. Whatever happened to them? "I don't need your assistance," she said in accented but clear human language. Her people had studied human speech patterns for years, preparing for eventual conquest. Dongwu stepped back but didn't look offended. "Sorry, I just thought you might be hungry. You haven't eaten anything since I found you." The smell of the soup was making it hard to think straight. Her enhanced metabolism needed fuel to heal her injuries, and her body was demanding food. But accepting meals from an enemy felt wrong. Back home, prisoners were given only what they needed to survive, and even that was considered too generous by many warriors. "Why haven't you contacted your authorities?" she asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "I'm obviously not human. Your people should want to study me or interrogate me." Dongwu shrugged and set the bowl on a small table next to the couch. The storm knocked out long-range communications. Even if I could call for help, nobody could get here until the weather clears. That might be another week. "So you're trapped here with someone who could kill you the moment she regains her strength," Hye-jin said, testing him. "Doesn't that concern you?" "Should it?" Dongwu asked, settling into a chair across from her. "You haven't tried to hurt me yet, and honestly, if you wanted me dead, I figure I'd already be dead. You look like someone who knows how to fight." His casual acceptance of danger baffled her. Velthari would never show such trust to a potential enemy. They would have restrained her, questioned her, and prepared for battle. This human was treating her like a guest instead of a threat. "Your species is foolish," she said, though there was less venom in her voice than usual. "Trust gets you killed in this galaxy." "Maybe," Dongwu said with a small smile. "But fear gets you killed just as fast. Besides, I've always been curious about what's out there beyond our little world. It's not every day someone literally crashes into my backyard from the stars." Despite herself, Hye-jin found his curiosity refreshing. Most beings she encountered either feared her people or tried to fight them. This human seemed genuinely interested in learning, rather than conquering or cowering. "What do you want to know?" she heard herself asking. The conversation that followed surprised them both. Dongwu asked about other worlds, different species, and what life was like among the stars. Hye-jin found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone. She described worlds covered in crystal forests where the trees sang in the wind. She talked about space stations larger than moons where thousands of species traded goods and information. But she carefully avoided mentioning the wars, the conquered worlds, or the billions who had died under Velthari rule. The third morning brought no relief from the storm outside. Snow continued piling against the windows of the weather station, while wind rattled the walls like an angry beast trying to get in. Hye-jin sat stiffly on the couch, watching Dongwu prepare what he called breakfast. Her shoulder throbbed with each movement, and the cuts on her arms had started bleeding again during the night. "Let me take a look at those wounds," Dongwu said, approaching with a first aid kit. "Some of them might be getting infected." "I heal faster than humans," Hye-jin replied curtly, though she could feel the heat of infection starting in her deeper cuts. "Velthari bodies repair themselves." "Maybe so, but you're not on your homeworld anymore," he said gently. "The bacteria here might be different from what your body knows how to fight. At least let me clean them properly." She wanted to refuse. Warriors of her people endured pain in silence and healed their own wounds. But the rational part of her mind knew he was right. She had been trained to adapt and survive in hostile environments, and right now that meant accepting help from this strange, kind human. "Fine," she said, extending her injured arm. "But be quick about it." What happened next shocked her to her core. Dongwu's touch was incredibly gentle as he cleaned her wounds. His hands moved carefully, making sure not to cause unnecessary pain. When she winced at the antiseptic, he immediately apologized and worked even more slowly. No one had ever treated her injuries with such care. In Velthari military training, wounds were cleaned roughly and quickly. Pain was considered character building. Medics worked with efficient brutality, caring only that soldiers could return to battle. The concept of bedside manner didn't exist in her culture. "This might sting a little," Dongwu warned before applying medicine to a particularly deep cut on her forearm. "I can handle pain," she said automatically, then was surprised when he looked up with genuine concern. "I know you can, that doesn't mean you should have to." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. Throughout her life, enduring suffering had been seen as strength. The idea that someone might want to spare her pain simply because pain was unpleasant was completely foreign to her way of thinking. As he worked, Dongwu talked quietly about everyday things. He mentioned how the storm reminded him of winters when he was a child. He told her about his job maintaining weather equipment and how he had chosen this isolated posting because he liked the peace and quiet. His voice was soothing in a way she had never experienced. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly, startling him as he bandaged her shoulder. "Doing what?" "Being kind to me, caring for my injuries like this. I could be your enemy. I probably am your enemy." Dongwu paused in his work and looked directly into her violet eyes. "Because you're hurt and far from home, because you're scared even though you're trying not to show it, because helping people who need help is just what you do." "That's not how the galaxy works," she said, her voice quieter than before. "Strength survives. Weakness dies. Kindness is a luxury that gets you killed." "Maybe that's how your part of the galaxy works," he replied, returning to the bandage. "But it's not how I work. My grandmother used to say that every act of kindness makes the universe a little bit better." even small ones. Hee-jin fell silent as he finished treating her wounds. The bandages were soft against her skin, applied with a care that made her chest feel tight in an unfamiliar way. When he was done, he brought her hot tea without being asked and made sure she was comfortable before returning to his own tasks. She watched him work around the small station, humming softly to himself as he checked equipment and prepared their next meal. Everything he did was done with the same gentle attention he had shown her wounds. By the 5th day of the storm, something had shifted between them. The weather station that had felt like a prison now seemed more like a safe haven from the chaos outside. Hye-jin found herself looking forward to their meals together, though she would never admit it out loud. "Tell me about your family," Dongwoo said over dinner, passing her a bowl of rice. He had learned she preferred simple foods that didn't overwhelm her enhanced senses. Hye-jin paused with the chopsticks halfway to her mouth. Family wasn't something Velthari discussed casually. "We don't have families the way humans do. Warriors are raised in training centers from birth. Individual bonds are considered inefficient." "That sounds lonely," he said softly. The word hit her unexpectedly. Lonely. She had never thought of her upbringing that way before. It was simply how things were done. Efficient, practical, designed to create perfect soldiers without emotional attachments that might interfere with orders. "Velthari don't experience loneliness," she said automatically, but even as the words left her mouth, they felt hollow. Dongwoo studied her face with those warm brown eyes that seemed to see too much. "What about friends, people you enjoyed spending time with?" She thought about her training partners, her fellow assassins, the warriors she had served alongside. They had worked together efficiently, respected each other's skills, but enjoyed spending time together. The concept was foreign. Every relationship had been built around utility and rank. "There was someone," she said slowly, surprising herself by speaking. "Kaira. We trained together for 7 years. She was the only one who could match my speed in combat drills." "Were you close?" Hye-jin struggled to find words for something she had never tried to describe. "We understood each other. When others saw only another weapon to be sharpened, she saw more. But expressing such thoughts was forbidden. Weakness. What happened to her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Hye-jin set down her chopsticks and stared at the fire, crackling in the hearth. "She was sent on a mission to infiltrate a rebel stronghold. She never returned. When I asked about her fate, I was told that dwelling on failed operatives showed dangerous emotional attachment." Dongwoo reached across the small table and gently touched her hand. The contact sent an electric shock through her system. Physical touch between Velthari was limited to combat training and medical necessity. This soft, comforting gesture was completely outside her experience. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Losing someone you care about hurts no matter what anyone tells you." Hye-jin stared at their joined hands. His skin was warm and rough from years of manual work, so different from the cold efficiency of her own people. She should pull away. This kind of contact violated everything she had been taught about maintaining proper distance. But instead she found herself turning her hand palm up, allowing their fingers to intertwine. "Tell me about your family," she said, desperate to shift focus away from the confusing feelings swirling inside her chest. Dongwoo's face lit up in a way that made something flutter in her stomach. "My parents run a small farm in the southern valleys. They grow vegetables and raise chickens, nothing exciting, but they're happy. My sister just had her first baby last year. I haven't met my nephew yet, but she sends pictures." He pulled out a small device and showed her images of a tiny human infant with wrinkled red skin and enormous eyes. "His name is Junho. Isn't he beautiful?" Hye-jin studied the pictures with fascination. Velthari young were born fully developed and immediately began training. The idea of a helpless infant that required years of care and protection was alien to her, yet there was something compelling about the small creature's vulnerability. "He looks fragile," she said carefully. "All babies are fragile. That's what makes them precious. They depend completely on the love and protection of others." Dongwoo's voice carried such warmth when he spoke about his family that Hye-jin felt something crack inside her chest. "You miss them," she observed. "Every day. But I chose this job because someone needs to do it and I'm good at it. Still, sometimes the isolation gets to me." The communication device crackled to life on the 7th morning, cutting through the peaceful quiet of their breakfast routine. Hye-jin froze with her cup of tea halfway to her lips as the harsh, guttural sounds of her native language filled the small station. Dongwoo looked up from his weather reports, concern creasing his features. "Communication restored," the mechanical voice announced in Velthari. "Priority message incoming." Hye-jin's blood turned cold. She had hoped the crash had destroyed her long-range communicator along with everything else. But Velthari technology was built to survive, and apparently her handlers had been trying to reach her for days. "What is it?" Dongwoo asked, noticing the sudden tension in her posture. "Nothing important," she lied, moving quickly to the device. Her fingers trembled slightly as she activated the secure channel. The familiar cold voice of Commander Zethko filled the room, speaking in the language of her people. "Operative Hye-jin. Status report. You have been silent for 6 rotations." She glanced at Dongwoo, who was pretending to focus on his own work, while obviously listening. "Equipment damaged in atmospheric entry. Require additional time for repairs." Unacceptable. The target Park Ji-ho must be eliminated before he can share intelligence with the human colony leaders. Satellite scans show him hiding in settlement Gamma 7, approximately 50 kilometers from your current position. Hye-jin's enhanced vision could see Dongwoo's shoulders tense at the mention of the settlement name. He understood enough to know they were discussing someone in his colony, someone who was now marked for death. "Understood, Commander. We'll proceed when weather permits." "Weather is irrelevant. You are Velthari. Complete the mission within 2 rotations or face execution for failure." The communication ended with a sharp click, leaving behind only the sound of wind outside and the crackling fire. Hye-jin stood, motionless, staring at the device that had just shattered her peaceful week with Dongwoo. "They want you to kill someone," Dongwoo said quietly. It wasn't a question. She turned to face him, and the disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than any blade. "It's what I do, what I was made to do." "Park Ji-ho is a good man," Dongwoo said, setting down his coffee cup with careful control. "He came here 3 months ago, said he was a researcher studying our agricultural methods. He's been helping the farmers improve their crop yields. The children in the settlement love him because he tells them stories about other worlds." Each word hit Hye-jin like a physical blow. She had been briefed that Park Ji-ho was a dangerous rebel, someone who threatened the stability of the galaxy. But Dongwoo's description painted a completely different picture. A man who helped others, who brought joy to children, who contributed rather than destroyed. "You don't understand," she said, her voice strained. "He has information that could start a war. Millions could die if he shares what he knows." "What kind of information could one man have that's worth his life?" Hye-jin opened her mouth to recite the official briefing, then stopped. She realized she had never been told exactly what information Park Ji-ho possessed. She had simply been given a target and told to eliminate him. Questions weren't encouraged in Velthari culture. Orders were followed without hesitation. I don't know," she admitted, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Dongwoo stood up slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the storm that was finally beginning to weaken. "Settlement Gamma 7 has about 200 people. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, families with children. They've never hurt anyone. They just want to live their lives in peace." "This isn't about them," Hye-jin said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's about the mission, about preventing greater harm." "Is it?" Dongwoo turned back to her, and she saw something she had never encountered before in the eyes of someone looking at her. Not fear, not hatred, but profound sadness. "Or is it about following orders without thinking about who gets hurt?" The question hung between them like a chasm. For the first time in her life, Hye-jin found herself questioning not just a specific order, but the entire foundation of everything she had been taught to believe. The storm had finally broken by the time Hye-jin reached settlement Gamma 7, her. Enhanced senses allowed her to move silently through the snow-covered streets, while the human colonists went about their evening routines. Warm light spilled from windows where families gathered for dinner, their laughter and conversation drifting into the cold night air. She had left the weather station without saying goodbye to Dongwu. The look of disappointment in his eyes had been too much to bear. Better to complete the mission quickly and be done with it. That's what she told herself as she tracked her target through the small community. Park Ji-ho wasn't hard to find. He was exactly where intelligence reports had placed him, living in a modest apartment above the settlement's small library. Through her scope, she could see him sitting at a desk, writing in what appeared to be a journal. He looked older than his file photos, with grey streaking his black hair and worry lines around his eyes. Hyejin positioned herself on a rooftop, with a clear line of sight. One shot, clean and quick. The man would never know what hit him. She had done this hundreds of times before without hesitation. Her finger found the trigger of her plasma rifle, the weapon humming softly as it charged. But as she watched Park Ji-ho through her scope, something strange happened. Instead of seeing a target to be eliminated, she saw a person. A man who moved with gentle care as he arranged papers on his desk. Someone who had chosen to live quietly among humans, helping them grow food and telling stories to their children. A soft knock came at Park Ji-ho's door. Through her enhanced hearing, Hyejin could hear a child's voice calling out in accented Korean. "Mr. Park, you promised to tell us about the crystal singing trees tonight." The man's face lit up with genuine warmth as he opened the door to reveal 3 young colonists, probably no older than 10 or 11 years old. They rushed into his small apartment with the boundless energy of children everywhere, chattering excitedly about their day. "Did you bring the drawing supplies?" Park Ji-ho asked, ruffling the hair of the smallest child. "We can sketch the crystal forest while I tell you the story." Hyejin's finger froze on the trigger. In all her years as an assassin, she had never been forced to watch her targets interact with innocence. Her missions were always clinical, distant, impersonal. She would study patrol patterns, identify the moment of vulnerability, and strike without witnessing the human connections that surrounded her prey. "Once upon a time," Park Ji-ho began, settling into a chair while the children arranged themselves on the floor around him, "there was a world where the trees were made of living crystal." The rifle scope showed her every detail of the scene. The way the children's eyes widened with wonder. How Park Ji-ho used his hands to illustrate the story, making the crystal trees seem to dance in the air. The trust and affection on those young faces as they listened to tales of distant worlds. These children would find his body tomorrow if she pulled the trigger now. They would be the ones to discover that their friend and storyteller had been murdered in cold blood. The trauma would mark them for life, stealing away their innocence and replacing it with fear. "Target acquired," she whispered into her communicator, but the words felt like ash in her mouth. "Proceed with elimination," came the cold response from her handlers. Hyejin's breathing became shallow as her training warred with something new stirring inside her chest. Every fiber of her being had been conditioned for this moment. Pull the trigger. Complete the mission. Serve the Empire without question or hesitation. But then she heard footsteps in the snow below. Her enhanced hearing picked up a familiar pattern of movement, a rhythm she had grown to know over the past week. Dongwu was approaching the building, moving with obvious urgency. He appeared in her scope's peripheral vision, entering the building through the main entrance. Within moments she could hear his voice through the thin walls as he spoke urgently to Park Ji-ho in low tones. The children were quickly ushered away with promises that story time would continue tomorrow. "I know you're out there," Dongwu called into the night, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "I know you can hear me." The sky above Settlement Gamma 7 suddenly filled with an ominous shadow as 3 Velthari warships descended through the clouds. Their sleek black hulls gleamed like predatory insects against the starlit night, silent, except for the low hum of their advanced engines. Hyejin's blood froze as she recognized the lead vessel. The Crimson Talon, flagship of Commander Zethko himself. Her communicator crackled to life with harsh commands in her native tongue. "Operative Hyejin, you have exceeded mission parameters. Prepare for extraction and disciplinary action." She was still crouched on the rooftop, her rifle trained on Park Ji-ho's window, but her finger had long since moved away from the trigger. Below in the street, Dongwu stood protectively in front of the building, his arms spread wide as if his human body could somehow shield everyone inside from what was coming. "Don't do this," he called up to her, his voice cutting through the Night air. You're better than they made you to be. I've seen who you really are. The warship settled into a hovering formation above the settlement. Hee-jin could see the weapon ports opening, preparing to reduce the entire community to ash if she continued to disobey orders. 200 innocent lives hung in the balance, and all because she had hesitated to pull one simple trigger. Final. Warning operative. Commander Zethko's voice boomed from the ship's speakers, now broadcasting in both Velthari and human languages. Complete your mission or we will complete it for you. The entire settlement will be cleansed to prevent contamination of our operative. Hye-jin felt something break inside her chest as she realized what that meant. They weren't just threatening to kill Park Ji-ho anymore. They were prepared to murder every man, woman and child in the settlement to cover up her moment of weakness. The families she had watched through their windows, the children who loved Park Ji-ho's stories. Dong-woo, who had shown her what kindness looked like. "You want to know what strength really is?" she whispered, standing up on the rooftop so the ship's sensors would lock onto her position. "It's not blindly following orders. It's choosing to protect the people you care about." She turned her rifle skyward and fired directly at the lead ship's weapon array. The plasma bolt struck true, sending sparks cascading through the night as the Crimson Talon's main cannon went offline. Alarms immediately began blaring from all three vessels as they realized their own operative had just attacked them. Traitor. Commander Zethko's voice roared across the settlement. "You dare turn against your own kind for these pathetic humans?" "My own kind," Hye-jin shouted back, switching to human language so everyone could understand. "My own kind would slaughter children to complete a mission. My own kind raised me to be a weapon instead of a person. These humans showed me what it means to actually care about someone." The warships began moving into attack formation, their remaining weapons charging with deadly energy. But Hye-jin was no longer the same person who had crash-landed here a week ago. She had learned something the Velthari had never taught her. She had learned to fight for something bigger than herself. "Everyone get to the emergency shelters." Dong-woo was shouting to the colonists as they poured from their homes in panic. "Move! Move!" Hye-jin leaped from rooftop to rooftop with superhuman agility, her rifle spitting plasma bolts at the circling ships. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to dodge their return fire while civilians ran for cover below. She had trained for combat her entire life, but never like this. Never with the desperate fury of someone protecting their chosen family. "The communication array," Park Ji-ho's voice carried from the street below. He was helping evacuate the younger colonists while pointing toward a tall tower on the settlement's edge. "If we can get a message to the colony defense force," Hye-jin understood immediately. The settlement's emergency beacon could bring help, but only if someone could reach it. The warships were already moving to destroy the tower, recognizing the threat. "Cover me," she called to Dong-woo, then launched herself in a desperate sprint across the settlement's rooftops. Behind her, the human who had saved her life was somehow keeping pace on the ground below, shouting warnings about incoming fire and coordinating the evacuation with a courage that made her heart swell with pride. For the first time in her life, Hye-jin was fighting a battle she truly believed in. The battle for Settlement Gamma 7 lasted through the night, but by dawn, the Velthari warships were retreating into the star-filled sky. Hye-jin's desperate message had reached the colony defense. Force and reinforcements had arrived just in time to tip the balance. The alien ships, damaged and outnumbered, had chosen tactical withdrawal over a prolonged fight they couldn't win. Hye-jin sat on the steps of the settlement's medical center, her blue skin marked with cuts and burns from the battle. Her combat armor was cracked and scorched, but she was alive. More importantly, so were the people she had chosen to protect. The colonists moved around her carefully, unsure how to treat someone who had been their enemy just hours before, but had fought so fiercely to save them. "The medic says you'll heal fine," Dong-woo said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee. His own clothes were torn and dirty from helping with the evacuation, but his warm smile was unchanged. "Though she's never treated alien physiology before, so she's mostly guessing." Hye-jin accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her long fingers around the warm cup. "I can never go home now," she said quietly. "To the Velthari I am dead. Worse than dead. I am a traitor who chose enemies over empire." "Are we enemies?" Dong-woo asked, gently touching a bandage on her arm. She looked into his kind brown eyes and felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past week, this human had shown her things she never knew existed. Compassion without weakness, strength that came from protecting others instead of destroying them, love that asked for nothing in return. "No," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "You're the opposite of enemies. I don't have a word for it in my language." "Family," Dongwu suggested. "Friends, people who care about each other." Park Ji-ho approached them carefully, his hands empty and his posture non-threatening. The man she had been sent to kill looked older than his years, but there was genuine gratitude in his eyes. "I wanted to thank you," he said in accented but clear Velthari, surprising her. "You saved not just my life, but the lives of everyone here." "Why?" Ye-jin asked, the question that had been burning inside her since the moment she lowered her rifle. "What information do you carry that they wanted you dead so badly?" Park Ji-ho sat down across from them, his expression growing serious. "Proof that the Velthari Empire has been lying to its own people. Evidence that many of the worlds they've conquered were peaceful, that the wars were started by your leaders to maintain control through fear. I was a historian before I became a refugee. I documented the truth." The revelation hit Hye-jin like a physical blow. Everything she had been taught about bringing order to a chaotic galaxy, about the righteousness of Velthari conquest, had been built on lies. How many innocent people had she killed in service to those lies? "Hey," Dongwu said softly, taking her hand as he saw the pain in her violet eyes. "You can't change what happened before. You can only choose what happens next." Over the following weeks, Hye-jin learned what it meant to be part of a community instead of a weapon. The colonists were initially wary, but her actions during the battle had earned their grudging respect. Children who had once hidden from her alien appearance now waved shyly when she passed. The farmers asked for her help with tasks that required her enhanced strength. Slowly, carefully, she began to build something she had never possessed before, a normal life. The Colony Council officially granted her refugee status, making her the first Velthari to receive human citizenship. She took a job helping Dongwu maintain the weather monitoring stations, work that used her technical skills for creation rather than destruction. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in their small shared home, reading books or simply talking about their days. "Do you ever regret it?" Dongwu asked one night as they watched snow fall outside their window. "Giving up everything you knew?" Hye-jin considered the question seriously. She thought about the cold efficiency of her old life, the constant training, the missions that had defined her existence. Then she looked at Dongwu's face in the firelight, at the gentle way he waited for her answer without pushing. "I didn't give up everything," she said finally. "I traded a life of taking for a life of giving. I traded fear for love. I traded being a weapon for being a person." She leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "Besides, I'm still a guardian. I just guard different things now." Through the window, she could see the lights of settlement Gamma 7 twinkling in the valley below. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more ways to help build instead of destroy. And beside her, the human who had taught her heart to beat. With something other than the rhythm of war held her close, proving that even the coldest killer could learn to love.